Hey fellas, this is Wes Mann coming at you from Gainesville, Florida. Just answering a few of these questions that Tom sent me. Um, got started probably 2 to 3 months out from that starting that test date. Um, I used a book called USMLE 1 First Aid, and I got through that a couple of times. And then the most helpful thing for me though was the USMLE World question bank, and I got through all of those questions about 1.5 times. To me, that was the most helpful thing, and I wish I'd have done more questions. Just seeing how questions are worded um, was the most helpful, I think, in retrospect. There was this CD going around by Goulian that everybody was using, which I listened to. Um, I don't feel like I absorbed much of that in that fashion. That may just be my personal style or limitation on how I'd learn.
I studied for step one in the few weeks immediately after the end of second year. At the time, I was living in the Chafee house, which was great encouragement. And I took 5 weeks off and studied 6 days a week, essentially. And if I remember correctly, that was basically all the time that we had right after um, second year and before we went on a trip to Ethiopia with SMI. And so we took the NBMEs, and then we had basically 7 weeks off, and I studied for 5. I took the test on a Friday, and I think like the next day we were on the way to SMI, if I remember correctly. So I studied 6 days a week, 12 hours a day. I broke it up into 4-hour blocks. I woke up at about 6:30. I ate breakfast, or 7, I think, and then I ate breakfast, and I had a quiet time from 7:30 to 8, and then I took a 4-hour block from 8 to 12. I watched Lost and ate lunch from noon to 1, and then uh, I studied again from 1 to 5. I did something active, whether it was the gym or running or something else, just whatever to keep me active from 5 to 6. Ate dinner from 6 to 7, and then did another 4-hour block until, or 3 to 4 hour block until about 10 or 11, whenever I felt like I could reasonably uh, stay productive. So that led to 5 weeks or 30 days of that, and in God's grace, I was able to stay fairly disciplined with that.
Practically, what I did to study to prepare for step one was I sort of created a spreadsheet with literally pretty much every hour of every day divided up. I decided to do a systems based approach. I used a couple book resources, the video and workbook sort of all the way through. And then I just watched some Kaplan videos on areas that I struggled in. I broke up each day into an hour of sort of breakfast quiet time. I studied in the library. I would head to the library. Um, Study until about lunchtime. I would take a break during lunch. I did not study. I took about 45 minutes. I would eat and, talk with people or just sit and meditate or just not, take that 45 minute sort of brain break. Then I would study again until about 6 p.m. And I would take a break for dinner. Sometimes I would work out during that time too. And then after dinner, I would either read one of the books I had decided to sort of read all the way through, or I would do flashcards and discuss topics with a friend. I had a very, very structured meal plan and workout plan as well, because I think that's just really important when you're sort of putting your mind through something like that your body be um, as healthy as possible. And so I did like meal prep on Sundays and would have sort of healthy meals. I try to like stay away from processed, stay away from sugar, not do too much caffeine if I could, that sort of thing. And then I worked out 4 days a week. I was actually probably in the best shape of my life studying for step one because that was so regimented and scheduled into my plan. Every Sunday, all day Sunday, I did not study at all. I think it's just really important to rest your mind, and God tells us that in His Word, and so that's something that I did. I also think it's really important to sleep, and so I made sure I got 8 hours of sleep every single night because sleep, I think, is when you're just sort of synthesizing all that information. So practically, that's what I did. If you would like to see my actual sort of spreadsheet schedule, you are more than welcome to. Or if you have, questions, comments, concerns. I studied in 4.5 weeks because I went on the mission trip after second year. And so I had a little bit of condensed time. That is not something I regret. Studying was not fun, and so having one less week was not a problem for me. I did start studying before school ended. I sort of gathered everything, had my stuff all together, like what I was going to do um, about 4 weeks before the year ended, and then started sort of studying a couple hours a day. I think I did like Pathoma and stuff like that in the weeks right before the last day of classes or what have you, and then did the 4.5 weeks, and then took the day off before the test completely. I think I went and watched a movie. I think I saw Now You See Me. Anyway, got a massage, had some time with a friend just for a prayer, and ate some really good food. And then went the next morning, met with a friend, prayed, and then took the test.
So practically, how and when did I prepare for step one? So obviously prepared for step one at the end of my second year. One of my good friends, George Lazary, and I created a study plan that was set to last about 4.5 weeks. We were the type of guys that didn't necessarily devote too much time to studying, so we knew we wouldn't be able to last for 5 or 6 weeks of studying. And plus we knew that the light at the end of the tunnel was to be able to go on the mission trip to Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, when we were done. So practically speaking, we got to the library every morning at 7:30. We stayed at the library from 7:30 to 5. We studied, we got a quiet time from 7:30 to 8. We studied from 8 to 12, taking a few minutes here or there to get up and stretch. From 12 to 12:30, we had lunch, and from 12:30 to 5, we continued to study. From 5 to about 8, we went and worked out every day as well as had dinner. We kind of went our separate ways for that. And then from 8 to 10, I personally would reconvene and just review some test questions and stuff. I actually usually don't do too well studying past 8 o'clock. My mind just doesn't function right. And then the next day we would wake up and repeat.
So I took step one in the middle of June, right before going on the SMI trip with MCO, which I definitely recommend doing. And I studied for about 4.5 to 5.5 weeks. I don't exactly remember, but certainly no more than that in the weeks leading up to it. I think any more than 6, and you run the risk of definitely getting burned out. I think I felt ready to take the test at about 4 to 4.5 weeks of studying. So don't extend it too long because it can hurt as much as it will help. I primarily use the UWorld question banks and first aid. I think I got through the question banks 1.5 times between a little bit prior to the study period as well as during the study period, and got through first aid maybe 2 times, again leading up to and during the study period. I may have used some other stuff initially, but by the end of the study period, you're just wanting to do sort of the highest yield stuff, and the question banks from UWorld, as well as first aid, are I think the number one ways to do that. So I studied for about 3.5 hours in the morning, and then tried to get 5 to 6 hours sometime after lunch, either all in the afternoon or later in the evening as well. I think it was pretty nice to actually be able to have total control over what I was doing all day. I was able to eat pretty healthy and work out and take breaks as I wanted to. So I definitely recommend picking a schedule and sticking to it, staying disciplined, but definitely taking breaks as well.
John Calhoun. I'm from Dothan, Alabama. I graduated MCG in 2012. I did residency at MUSC in Charleston in internal medicine. And I've been back here in Dothan and practiced doing primary care for the last 2 years now. So, how did I prepare for step one? I used first aid as most people do. It's really succinct, it has most information you need in there. I used a question bank, I used USMLE World. I think I got through the questions once, maybe. I used the Doctors in Training program, which I think was really worth it just to help you kind of get through first aid because it can get pretty monotonous, just getting in the routine of going and studying, and some of the information is pretty difficult to get through and pretty stale. So it really helped me out. A lot of it is really just getting through first aid because that has a lot of what you need, and then a good question bank. And so much of it is just learning how to take the test and learning stamina, because by a few hours in, you're just going to be ready to be done. So you really need that practice to be able to power through it. And I did studying at home. I did study at coffee shops. I think Atlanta Bread there's no telling how much money I spent there. But that was most of what I did. I studied my kind of personal experience was that I had plans the day before. Day before I actually took step one, that I was gonna, stop pretty early, hang out with my wife in the afternoon. But when it actually came time, I kind of got anxious and started getting stressed out and felt like there were more things I needed to look over, more high yield things that were for sure going to be on the test I needed to review. And so it wasn't until late afternoon before I finally called it quits on the studying. And then my mind just started racing, and I had trouble sleeping that night. I don't think I got to sleep at all, which was very unusual for me. I never had this problem before. So it was about 5 o'clock, then 6 o'clock the morning of the test. And I was trying to scramble and find a way to cancel it because I've been basically up all night, and I've got to take this really important test, and there was no numbers to call. There was nobody in touch with to cancel it. And I think I remember waking my wife up and asking what I should do, and she basically said, "All right, well, you gotta take the test." And so I should have failed it, but in God's grace and His providence, I passed, and He really gave me a score that I didn't deserve at all. I really didn't know what it was for at the time, but it was really to kind of get me into the residency He wanted to get me into. And looking back, I can just see how it was totally just His grace. I did not earn those test scores at all.
Hi, my name's Lee Rawlings. I'm an anesthesiologist in Athens, Georgia, and I graduated from MCG in 2007. Practically speaking, how and when did I study for step one? Because I failed twice, I think I have more experience than just about anybody in this area. And there were several elements that were key. Number one, I started every day with a quiet time. I believe that this was critical for the way that I approached the information, the way that I went about studying. Number two, I only studied 6 days a week. I felt like that Sabbath day was not only spiritual in terms of rest and recharging, but also important in terms of taking short-term memorized information and allowing it time to be condensed into long-term memories. I started studying at about 7 o'clock in the morning, took about 30 to 45 minutes for lunch, and studied until about 6. I think it's important to study 8 to 10 hours a day, depending on your effectiveness and how efficient you are as a studier. And finally, I studied based on a calendar. I came up with a regimen that I knew I could complete, that I knew would challenge me, that I knew after completing I would have done my best. And most importantly, I was really honest with myself about how well I knew the information. I didn't do any kind of fluffing myself up or making myself feel like I knew information that I didn't have a really, really firm grasp on.